It's our standard practice that all children, youth, and vulnerable adults will be supervised by two unrelated adults, and no child should be left alone with an adult or out of a sight of another adult. What that means is that if you're in a room or an area with children, there needs to be another adult or someone else needs to be able to see you. You need to be in fair view with them. Sometimes that can always happen within our Sunday school classes. We don't have two teachers for each class. So in that case, what we do is we keep the door open or the window open so that other adults can check and observe and make sure that everything is safe. Another place where this may be an issue is in the restroom. So you don't want to be in the restroom alone with a child. If you're in the bathroom and other children come in, don't panic, but finish what you're doing and leave the room. If you're worried about their safety, you can stand outside the bathroom and make sure that everything's okay. The exception to this would be if there's a young child who needs help or asks for help in the bathroom. By all means, we want to help a child that needs or wants help. So you can do that, but you would want to leave the bathroom door open so that anybody else would be able to come in and see that everything's okay. Sometimes a child is having a bad day and they may need you to have a conversation with them. Either they're asking for a conversation or you realize they need a conversation. And it's personal, and you don't want to humiliate a child if there's a disciplinary issue, and certainly some things that they only want to speak with one person and not the whole group or a large number of people. So you can take the child aside to talk to them, but you still need to be in plain view of another adult. So it's just a safe way to make sure that there's no misunderstandings and that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and just to keep everybody safe. Nobody should supervise children unless they're at least 5 years older than the group. So a lot of times our youth will want to work with some of the younger people in our community, and they can do that as long as they're 5 years old or older than the group and the oldest person in the group. And the PIC is responsible for making sure that these supervisor requirements are kept. So what happens if you suspect a child is being abused? The first thing you want to do is validate their feelings. It's like, understand that they have a concern. You stop and you want to listen to them, and you can repeat it back, their words, so that you make sure you understand what they're talking about. The next thing you need to do is assess the level of safety. Is this an issue where you need to call 911? Most of the time it's not going to be something that you need immediate care, but if that were to happen, you need to be aware that that is a possibility. All allegations are taken seriously, and they should be reported either to the clergy or the PIC, the person in charge. Of course, if if the clergy or the PIC is a person that's suspected of being the abuser, of course you want to find somebody else in leadership of the church to give that allegation to. What they do is immediately they will take all the information and make sure that they understand exactly what's going on and what the allegation is, what the child's name is, and what happened and when and where. And then they're going to go to report that to Health and Welfare. Health and Welfare will do their own investigation, and they will determine if there was if it was a valid concern or a misunderstanding. The next thing that the clergy or the person in charge or whatever other leader that you need to talk to will do is that allegation needs to be sent to the Sage District Superintendent. Every incident needs to be reported to them. So you would report it to leadership would report it to Health and Welfare, And then the leadership would also report it to the Sage District Superintendent. Now, what happens there is you need to just give it to God. You've done your part, because you will probably never know what the outcome is. It may be a complete misunderstanding, or maybe you misunderstood, or the child misunderstood, or maybe it is a valid concern and there's other actions that need to be taken. But after you give the information to them, they're not going to be able to offer you any information back. They're not going to be able to tell you what the outcome was, what the resolution was. So I would just give that to them, give it to God. You can pray to God and give him your concerns and ask him for your personal guidance. But the only thing that you would ever be able to ask is, a few days later, to the person you reported it to, were you able to report that to the correct agencies? And you know where they need to go. They need to contact Health and Welfare, and they need to contact the Sage District Superintendent. That's the only question that you would be able to get an answer from. In Idaho, it's mandatory to report abuse. It's a law. So even if you suspect abuse, that has to be sent to Health and Welfare. Of course, you don't want to accuse anybody falsely. So, we're talking about the correct way to ask a child a question. We want to make sure that we're not leading those questions so that we're not getting an answer that we may think might be, could be, whatever. So, but if there is a valid concern, and if you're concerned enough to report it to clergy or leadership, that's valid enough for the Health and Welfare to go ahead and do their investigation. One thing that we need to remember is that it is paramount that you do not discuss this issue with your friends or other people at church. Because what happens in an incident like this, something happens and so-and-so tells so-and-so, and then the story grows. And the person that's being hurt by that is the child. So the child is going to have that story around them, and it will grow like wildfire, and it can be just as damaging as wildfire. So speaking of talking about children and incidences with children, there is another thing that we do need to talk about. Sometimes children in this situation or other situations can misbehave. And sometimes it's normal to misbehave. But a child will act up in a place where they feel safe. They're testing their boundaries. They want to see how far they can go before they get hurt or they get disciplined. And that's a normal and healthy thing for children to do. Sometimes it's frustrating for us to deal with. And believe me, I raised 2 boys. There were several times where it was extremely frustrating. And it can be frustrating with any child. What we need to remember is that children change, for one thing. And also, you don't know what's going on in that child's life. You can say, oh, I know their family. I've known their family for 15 years. They're good people. There's nothing going on there. Or you can say, well, I see that kid at school, the school I volunteer at, and he's this way or she's that way. And it doesn't matter. You don't know what's going on in that child's life. So to call a child a name, which I've heard, or make comments, derogatory comments about a child is not acceptable. That child does, whatever the issues are, does not need to have that information thrown around, because they'll grow up and they'll learn to deal with whatever is in their life, or they'll mature and they won't be that way, or a myriad of things can happen down the road. But they're always going to carry that rumor about them for the rest of their lives. It'll be years, and they'll still be hearing, and other people will be hearing about how they misbehaved. So we need to make sure that we are keeping that in check and we're not talking about it. It's not acceptable behavior to talk ill of a child. So that's something in your actions that you can keep check of. And also, and besides the child and their relationships with people, it can also damage adult relationships with that child's family. So you especially don't want to do something such as tell one parent problems that you've had with some other parent's children. So again, it's offensive, it's unacceptable behavior, and we need to make sure that anything that when we're talking with our children and we're dealing with children and these type of issues, we need to make sure that we're keeping that to ourselves. And if you get to the point where it's so frustrating that you find yourself talking about a child this way, then we need to make a change. We either need a break for a while, or you need to change your duties with the children, or you just need a break from working as a volunteer for a while, or you need some spiritual guidance. If you needed something to change, if you want a different job, or you need a job or a break from the job, come and tell me. I'll make sure it's done. If you need spiritual guidance, you can certainly talk to Brenda or anybody else that you feel is a mentor to you and have them help you. But make sure it's not somebody that's going to take that information and tell somebody else. So I guess that's all I needed to say about that. Thank you.